Welcome back to Easy English Talk Podcast.
Welcome to the Easy English Talk Podcast, everyone. We are so happy to have you here with us again. Priya, hey, good to see you today. How has your day been so far?
Hey, Ryan. My day has been really good, thank you. I spent some time reading this morning, and I had a nice cup of coffee before coming here. It was a calm start, which I always appreciate. How about you?
That sounds like a lovely morning. Mine was a little busy, honestly. I had a few things to take care of early, but I'm here now, and I am really looking forward to our conversation today. It is going to be an important one.
I agree. I was actually thinking about today's topic on my way here. It's one of those subjects that really makes you stop and think. I'm glad we decided to talk about it.
Absolutely. And before we begin, I want to say hello to everyone watching and listening right now. Wherever you are in the world, whether you are in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, or anywhere else, thank you for being here with us.
Yes, truly. We always love hearing from you. It means a lot that you choose to spend your time with us. Every single one of you is part of this community, and that is something special.
I would love to know where you were listening from today. Please drop your country or your city in the comments. It's always amazing to see how many different places our listeners come from. It reminds us that learning connects people everywhere.
And while you're at it, let us know if this podcast is helping you. Is your English getting better? Are the topics helping you think about the world in new ways? We really want to hear your honest thoughts.
Yes, your feedback helps us improve, so please share your thoughts in the comments. We read them, and we truly care about what you have to say. Now, Priya, let us talk about today's episode.
Yes, let us do that. I think people are going to find this one very interesting. It's a topic that has been in the news for a very long time, but many people do not fully understand the reasons behind it.
You are right, and I want to say something before we start. Today's topic is a little different from what we usually discuss. It's not our typical conversation about habits, mindset, or daily life, but we thought it was important to talk about it.
I agree completely. Understanding the world around us is also a form of self-growth. When we learn about global events, we become more informed, more thoughtful, and better at understanding different perspectives. That's valuable.
Exactly. And we'll explain everything in simple, clear English so that everyone can follow along easily. You do not need to be an expert in politics or history to understand this. We'll walk through it step by step together.
That is what we do best. We take big topics and break them down into pieces that are easy to understand. So if you've ever wondered about this subject, this is the right episode for you.
So today we're discussing why Israel is so afraid of Iran's nuclear program. Now, if you've seen the news at any point in the last 20 years, you've probably heard about this, but many people do not fully understand why Israel feels so strongly about it.
And that's what makes this episode worth your time. By the end, you'll have a clear understanding of the history, the fears, the reasons, and the bigger picture. You'll be able to follow news stories about this topic with real understanding.
So stay with us until the end. This is one of those episodes where every part builds on the one before it. If you leave early, you might miss something important. Trust us, it will be worth it.
And as always, the English we use will be clear and simple, so you're learning English and learning about the world at the same time. That's a great combination if you ask me.
All right, let us begin by understanding the basics. Priya, when people hear the words nuclear program, these sometimes get confused. Can we start with what that actually means in simple terms?
Of course. A nuclear program is when a country works on technology that uses nuclear energy. Nuclear energy comes from atoms, which are very tiny particles. When you split an atom, it releases a huge amount of energy.
And that energy can be used for different things, right? It's not always about weapons. Some countries use nuclear energy to make electricity for their cities and homes.
Exactly. Many countries around the world use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, like generating electricity. But the same technology can also be used to make nuclear weapons, which are the most powerful and destructive weapons ever created.
And that's where the fear comes in. When a country develops nuclear technology, other countries often worry about whether it will be used for energy or for weapons. That concern is at the heart of this whole issue.
Right. And with Iran, this has been at the center of global attention for decades. Iran says its nuclear program is for peaceful energy, but many countries, especially Israel, believe that Iran may be trying to build a nuclear weapon.
So let us talk about Israel for a moment. Why does Israel care so much about this? There are many countries in the world with nuclear programs. Why is Iran's program such a big concern for Israel specifically?
That is a great question, and there are several important reasons. The first and most obvious one is geography. Israel and Iran are in the same part of the world. They are not neighbors with a shared border, but they are close enough that a long-range missile could reach from one to the other.
So the physical distance matters. If Iran ever had a nuclear weapon and decided to use it, Israel would be within reach. That is a very real and practical fear.
Exactly. Israel is a small country. It's much smaller than Iran in both size and population. A single nuclear weapon could cause enormous damage to Israel. The country does not have the geographic size to absorb such an attack.
That is a point many people do not think about. When a country is very large, like Russia or the United States, a single weapon, while devastating, would not destroy the entire country. But Israel is different because of its small size.
Yes, Israel is roughly the size of a small state or province. Most of its population lives in a few major cities, so the threat of even one nuclear weapon is considered an existential threat, meaning it could threaten the very existence of the country.
That word, existential, is important here. It does not just mean dangerous, it means a threat that could end your existence entirely. And that is how Israel views this situation.
And that is not an exaggeration. Israeli leaders, security experts, and military officials have used that exact word many times. They see Iran's nuclear program as the single greatest threat to their survival as a nation.
Now, let us add another important layer to this. It is not just about geography and size. There is a long history of political tension between Israel and Iran. Can you help us understand that, Priya?
Of course. This might surprise some people, but Israel and Iran actually had a friendly relationship many decades ago. Before 1979, Iran was ruled by a king called the Shah. During that time, Iran and Israel worked together on many things, including trade and diplomacy.
That is very interesting. So they were not always enemies. What changed in 1979? That seems to be a very important year in this story.
It was. In 1979, there was a revolution in Iran. The Shah was removed from power and a new government took over. This new government was led by religious leaders, and it was called the Islamic Republic of Iran. The new leaders had very different views about Israel.
And those views were not friendly at all, were they? From what I understand, the new government in Iran was openly against Israel from the very beginning.
That is correct. The new leaders of Iran called Israel an illegitimate state. They refused to recognize Israel as a country. They even said that Israel should not exist. This was a complete reversal from the previous relationship.
So practically overnight, Israel went from having a partner in the region to having a powerful country that said it should not exist. That must have been a very alarming change for Israel.
It was. And it was not just words. Over the years, Iran began supporting groups that were fighting against Israel. Iran provided money, weapons, and training to organizations like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Palestinian territories.
And those groups have been involved in conflicts with Israel for many years. So from Israel's perspective, Iran is not just a country that says hostile things. It is a country that actively supports military groups on Israel's borders.
Exactly. This is what security experts call a proxy strategy. Instead of fighting Israel directly, Iran supports smaller groups that carry out attacks. This has made Israel feel surrounded by threats that are connected back to Iran.
So, when we put all of this together, we can start to see why Israel is so worried. It's a combination of geography, the small size of the country, decades of hostile statements, and active support for groups fighting against Israel.
And now, on top of all that, add the possibility that Iran could develop a nuclear weapon. You can understand why Israel sees this as the most serious threat it has ever faced.
Let us go a little deeper into the nuclear question itself. What do we actually know about Iran's nuclear program? How far along is it, and why do people believe it might be aimed at building a weapon?
Iran started its nuclear program many decades ago, actually, with help from the United States back when the Shah was in power. After the revolution, the program continued, but it became more secretive. In the early 2000s, the world discovered that Iran had secret nuclear facilities.
Secret facilities. That's a big deal. If a country is building nuclear technology only for peaceful energy, there is usually no reason to hide it. The secrecy is what made other countries suspicious.
Exactly. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is called the IAEA, is the global organization that monitors nuclear programs around the world. When they investigated Iran, they found evidence that Iran had been doing nuclear work that it had not reported.
And what kind of work was that? Was it the kind of work that would be needed for weapons, or could it have been for energy?
Some of the work was specifically related to enriching uranium, which is a key process. Uranium is a natural element found in the ground. When you enrich it to a low level, it can be used for energy. But when you enrich it to a very high level, it can be used for a weapon.
So the level of enrichment is what makes the difference. And what has Iran been doing? Have they been enriching uranium to low levels or high levels?
Over the years, Iran has gradually increased its enrichment levels. At times, it has enriched uranium to levels that are much higher than what is needed for energy. This has alarmed many countries because it means Iran is getting closer to the level needed for a weapon.
That is a very important detail. It is not just about having the technology. It is about how far they take it. And the higher the enrichment, the closer they are to weapon-grade material.
Correct. And experts say that once a country reaches a certain level of enrichment, the final step to weapon-grade material can happen very quickly. This is sometimes called breakout time, the time it would take to produce enough material for one nuclear weapon.
And how long is Iran's breakout time right now? Do we have any idea?
Estimates vary, but many experts believe that Iran's breakout time is now very short, possibly just a few weeks. That is a significant change from years ago, when it was estimated at about a year. This shrinking timeline is one of the reasons tensions have increased.
A few weeks? That is very fast. I can see why that would make Israel extremely nervous. If a decision were made to build a weapon, it could happen before anyone had time to respond.
That is exactly the concern. And it is not just Israel that is worried. The United States, European countries, and many other nations have expressed concern about Iran's nuclear progress. But Israel feels the most threatened because of the reasons we discussed earlier.
Now let us talk about something that many people wonder about. Has there been any effort to stop Iran's nuclear program through diplomacy? Have countries tried to solve this without conflict?
Yes, absolutely. There have been many diplomatic efforts over the years. The most significant one was the Iran nuclear deal, officially called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. It was signed in 2015 by Iran, the United States, and several other world powers.
And what did that deal do? What were the basic terms?
In simple terms, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear activities and allow international inspectors to monitor its facilities. In return, the other countries agreed to remove economic sanctions, which are penalties that had been hurting Iran's economy.
So it was a trade. Iran would slow down its nuclear work, and the world would stop punishing its economy. That sounds like a reasonable compromise. Did it work?
For a while, it seemed to be working. Iran reduced its uranium stockpile and lowered its enrichment levels. Inspectors from the IAEA were allowed into Iran to check on things. Many people felt hopeful that the situation was under control.
But something changed, right? I remember hearing that the deal fell apart at some point.
Yes, in 2018, the United States, under President Donald Trump, withdrew from the deal. The U.S. government said the deal was not strong enough and that it did not address other concerns about Iran's behavior, such as its support for armed groups in the region.
And what happened after the U.S. left the deal? Did Iran continue to follow the rules?
Not for long. After the U.S. withdrew and reimposed heavy sanctions on Iran, Iran began stepping back from its commitments too. It started enriching uranium to higher levels again and reduced access for international inspectors. The situation began to unravel.
So the deal, which had been keeping things somewhat stable, collapsed. And since then, Iran's nuclear program has advanced further than it was before the deal was signed. Is that correct?
That is correct. Many experts say that Iran's nuclear program is now more advanced than it has ever been. This is one of the great ironies of the situation. The effort to put more pressure on Iran may have actually pushed it to move faster.
That's a really important point. Sometimes when you try to pressure someone too much, they go in the opposite direction. And in this case, the consequences are extremely serious.
Exactly. And this is where Israel's fear has grown even more intense. With no deal in place and Iran's program advancing rapidly, Israel feels that the window to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is closing.
Let me ask you something, Priya. Israel itself is widely believed to have nuclear weapons, although it has never officially confirmed this. Does that change the situation at all?
That is a very important question, and it's something many people bring up. Yes, it is widely believed that Israel has had nuclear weapons for decades. Israel follows a policy of what is called nuclear ambiguity, meaning it neither confirms nor denies having them.
So if Israel already has nuclear weapons, why would it be so afraid of Iran getting them? Would it not be a balance of power where both sides have weapons and neither would use them?
That is the theory called mutual deterrence, and it has worked between some countries, like the United States and Russia during the Cold War. But Israel does not believe this theory would work with Iran. Israeli leaders argue that the situation with Iran is fundamentally different.
Different how? What makes Israel think that deterrence would not work in this case?
There are a few arguments Israel makes. First, Israeli leaders point to the extreme statements made by some Iranian officials over the years. Some Iranian leaders have made threats about destroying Israel. Israel argues that a government that makes such statements cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons.
I see. So Israel's position is that you cannot rely on rational behavior from a government that has openly talked about your destruction. Whether or not those statements are serious, the risk is too high to take the chance.
That is their argument. The second concern is about the proxy groups we mentioned earlier. Israel worries that if Iran had nuclear weapons, it would feel more protected and become even bolder in supporting groups like Hezbollah and Hamas.
That is an interesting point. A nuclear weapon would act like a shield for Iran. It would make other countries more hesitant to respond to Iran's actions because no one wants to start a conflict with a nuclear-armed country.
Exactly. This is what experts call a nuclear umbrella. Under the protection of nuclear weapons, Iran could increase its influence in the region without fear of major military retaliation. Israel sees this as extremely dangerous.
And the third concern, I imagine, is about the spread of nuclear weapons to other countries in the region. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, would other countries want one too?
Yes, that is a major worry, not just for Israel, but for the whole world. If Iran develops nuclear weapons, countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt might feel they need their own nuclear weapons to maintain balance. This is called nuclear proliferation.
And the more countries that have nuclear weapons, the higher the risk that something goes wrong. It could be an accident, a miscalculation, or even theft by a dangerous group. The risks multiply.
Exactly. So this is not just a problem between Israel and Iran. It is a problem that affects the entire Middle East and the world. But Israel feels the most direct and immediate threat.
Let us also talk about what Israel has actually done in response to this threat. Israel has not just been sitting and worrying. It has taken some very bold actions over the years.
That is true. Israel has a history of taking military action against nuclear programs it considers a threat. In 1981, Israel bombed a nuclear reactor in Iraq. In 2007, Israel bombed a suspected nuclear facility in Syria. Both attacks were done without warning.
So Israel has shown that it is willing to use military force to prevent other countries in the region from developing nuclear weapons. These were not just threats, they were actual attacks on nuclear sites.
Yes. And this history is important because it tells us that Israel takes a very proactive approach. It does not wait for a threat to become fully real. It acts to prevent the threat from developing in the first place.
Now, with Iran, the situation is much more complicated than Iraq or Syria. Iran's nuclear facilities are spread across the country, and many of them are deep underground, making them very hard to attack.
That is one of the biggest challenges.
Iran learned from what happened in Iraq and Syria. It built its facilities in multiple locations and buried some of them deep inside mountains. A military strike on Iran would be far more difficult and risky.
And the consequences of such an attack could be enormous. Iran is a large and powerful country. An attack on its nuclear sites could lead to a wider conflict in the region, something nobody wants.
Absolutely. It could involve multiple countries and armed groups across the Middle East. It could disrupt global oil supplies. It could lead to attacks on military bases and civilian areas. The risks are very high.
So Israel faces a very difficult decision. On one hand, it sees Iran's nuclear program as the greatest threat to its existence. On the other, the options to stop it are extremely dangerous and complicated.
It is one of the most difficult strategic situations in the world today, and there are no easy answers. Every option, whether diplomacy, sanctions, or military action, has significant risks and limitations.
Let us talk about what the international community has tried to do beyond the nuclear deal. What other efforts have been made to address this problem?
Well, the United Nations has passed multiple resolutions related to Iran's nuclear program. Various countries have imposed economic sanctions on Iran over the years. These sanctions have targeted Iran's oil exports, banking system, and trade.
And have those sanctions had any real effect? Have they slowed down Iran's nuclear progress?
Sanctions have hurt Iran's economy significantly. Many ordinary Iranians have suffered because of reduced trade and economic hardship. But the nuclear program has continued to advance despite the sanctions. Iran's government has treated the nuclear program as a top priority.
So sanctions create pain, but do not necessarily stop the program. That is frustrating for countries that rely on sanctions as a tool. It seems like no single approach has been fully effective.
That is the reality. And this is why some people argue that a new, stronger diplomatic agreement is needed, one that addresses not just the nuclear issue, but also Iran's missile program and its support for armed groups in the region.
That sounds ideal in theory, but getting all parties to agree on such a comprehensive deal would be incredibly difficult. The trust between these countries has been damaged over many years.
Trust is indeed the biggest obstacle. Iran does not trust the United States after the withdrawal from the 2015 deal. Israel does not trust Iran at all, and the other countries involved have their own interests and concerns. Building trust in such an environment is extremely challenging.
Let me bring up another dimension of this issue. How do the people in these countries feel about it? We often talk about governments and leaders, but what about ordinary citizens?
That is such an important question. In Israel, surveys show that most citizens see Iran's nuclear program as a serious threat. It is not just a political issue. It is a personal fear for many people who worry about the safety of their families and their country.
And in Iran, how do people feel about their own country's nuclear program?
It is more complicated. Many Iranians support the right to have nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. They see it as a matter of national pride and sovereignty. But many also want better relations with the world and are tired of sanctions that hurt their daily lives.
So on both sides, ordinary people are affected by decisions made at the highest levels of government. People in both countries want safety and a better life, but they are caught in a much larger geopolitical struggle.
Exactly. And that is something we should always remember when we discuss topics like this. Behind the politics and the headlines, there are real people whose lives are shaped by these decisions.
That is such an important perspective. Now, let us talk about what the future might look like. What are the possible scenarios going forward?
There are several possible paths. The first is a return to diplomacy. There have been on and off talks about reviving the nuclear deal or creating a new one. If successful, this could limit Iran's nuclear activities and reduce tensions.
But as we discussed, that path is full of obstacles. The distrust is deep, and the political will for a new deal is uncertain on all sides.
That is true. The second scenario is continued escalation. If no deal is reached, Iran could continue advancing its nuclear program. Israel could respond with more aggressive actions, including cyber attacks, sabotage, or even military strikes.
And we've already seen some of those actions, right? There have been reports of cyber attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities and mysterious incidents at some of its sites.
Yes, one of the most famous examples is Stuxnet, computer virus, which was discovered in 2010. It was designed to damage the machines Iran used to enrich uranium. It is widely believed to have been created by the United States and Israel, though neither has officially confirmed it.
So there's a shadow conflict already happening, a conflict that involves technology, intelligence, and covert operations rather than open military action.
Exactly. And there have also been assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists over the years, which Iran has blamed on Israel. These actions show how seriously Israel takes this threat and how far it is willing to go.
These are very serious actions with very serious consequences. Each one raises the risk of a larger conflict. It is like a very dangerous game where any move could trigger a much bigger reaction.
That is a very accurate way to describe it. And the third possible scenario is that Iran actually develops a nuclear weapon. If that happens, the entire dynamics of the Middle East would change dramatically.
And what would that change look like? What would happen if Iran actually got a nuclear weapon?
As we discussed earlier, other countries in the region might pursue their own nuclear weapons. Israel would face a new and permanent threat. The balance of power in the Middle East would shift significantly. It would be a very different and more dangerous world.
It sounds like none of the scenarios are particularly optimistic. Is there any reason for hope in this situation?
I think there's always room for hope, even in the most difficult situations. History has shown that countries that were once enemies have found ways to make peace. Diplomacy has resolved conflicts that seemed impossible to solve.
Can you give an example of that? Sometimes it helps to remember that things have worked out in the past, even when they seemed hopeless.
Sure. One example is the relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. For decades, these two superpowers had thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other. Many people feared a nuclear war was inevitable, but through diplomacy, communication, and arms control agreements, they managed to avoid it.
That is a powerful example. It shows that even when the stakes are incredibly high, talking and negotiating can make a difference. It takes time, patience, and courage, but it is possible.
Another example is the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt in 1979. Before that, they had fought several wars, but through negotiation, they reached an agreement that has lasted for over 40 years. It shows that peace between former enemies is achievable.
Those examples are encouraging, but they also required leaders who were willing to take risks for peace. Leaders who put the long-term good of their people ahead of short-term political gains.
That is exactly right, and that is what is needed now. Leaders on all sides who are willing to take bold steps toward a peaceful solution. The alternative, continued escalation, is too dangerous for everyone.
Let us also consider the role of other countries in this situation. The United States has been deeply involved, but what about other major powers like Russia, China, and European nations?
Each of these countries plays a different role. The United States has historically been Israel's strongest ally and has taken the hardest line against Iran's nuclear program. European countries like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have tried to balance diplomacy with pressure.
And what about Russia and China? Where do they stand on this issue?
Russia and China have generally been more sympathetic to Iran. They have trade relationships with Iran and have sometimes opposed strong actions against it in international forums. This creates a complicated picture because the major powers do not agree on how to handle the situation.
So, the lack of unity among the large powers makes it harder to find a solution. If all major countries were on the same page, they would have more leverage to negotiate with Iran.
Exactly. The divisions among world powers are one of the reasons this problem has been so difficult to resolve. Iran has sometimes used those divisions to its advantage.
This is such a complex web of relationships, interests, and fears. I think our listeners can now see that this is not a simple black and white issue. There are many layers and many perspectives.
Absolutely, and that is one of the most important things to understand about global issues like this. They are rarely simple. Every side has its reasons, its fears, and its goals. Understanding all of those is the first step toward finding solutions.
Let us now talk about what ordinary people, like our listeners, can take away from this discussion. We may not be world leaders, but understanding these issues matters.
I completely agree. First, being informed is powerful. When you understand what is happening in the world, you can form your own opinions based on facts, not just headlines or emotional reactions. That makes you a more thoughtful and responsible global citizen.
And second, understanding different perspectives helps us have better conversations with people from different backgrounds. We may meet people from Israel, Iran, or other countries involved in this situation. Having knowledge helps us listen and engage respectfully.
That is so true. And third, learning about these topics improves your English in a meaningful way. You learn vocabulary related to international relations, diplomacy, and global affairs. These are words and concepts that appear in news articles, podcasts, and professional conversations.
That is a great point. Words like sanctions, enrichment, deterrence, proliferation, and diplomacy are all words that our listeners have learned today. And they learn them in context, which is the best way to learn new words.
Exactly. When you learn words through real stories and real conversations, they stick with you. You understand not just what the word means, but how it is used and why it matters.
I want to share one more thought before we start wrapping up. This topic is about fear, and fear is something all humans experience. Israel's fear of Iran's nuclear program is rooted in a desire to survive and protect its people.
And Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology is also driven by its own concerns. Iran feels threatened by powerful countries and believes that nuclear technology gives it security and respect on the world stage. Both sides are driven by fear in different ways.
That is such an insightful observation. When we understand that fear is the driving force on both sides, we can begin to see the humanity in the situation. It does not mean we agree with every action, but we can understand the emotions behind them.
And that understanding is what makes peaceful solutions possible. When you acknowledge someone's fears, you create space for dialogue. When you dismiss their fears, you create space for conflict.
Beautifully said, Priya. I think that is a principle that applies not just to global politics, but to our everyday lives as well. Understanding fear, whether in nations or in people, is the beginning of wisdom.
I completely agree, and I hope our listeners take that idea with them long after this episode is over. It is a simple but powerful truth.
All right, I think it is time to start bringing this conversation to a close. Let us briefly go over what we've discussed today so our listeners can walk away with a clear picture.
Sure. We started by explaining what a nuclear program is and why the difference between peaceful nuclear energy and nuclear weapons matters so much. This foundation helped us understand the core of the issue.
Then we talked about the relationship between Israel and Iran, how they were once friendly, and how the 1979 revolution in Iran completely changed that relationship into one of hostility and distrust.
We discussed why Israel feels especially threatened: its small size, its closeness to Iran, the hostile statements from Iranian leaders, and Iran's support for armed groups fighting against Israel all contribute to a deep sense of danger.
We also explored Iran's nuclear progress, the concept of uranium enrichment, and how Iran's breakout time has shortened significantly, making the threat feel more immediate for Israel.
We talked about the diplomatic efforts, including the 2015 nuclear deal and its collapse, and why building trust between these countries is so incredibly difficult.
We looked at the actions Israel has taken, from military strikes on nuclear facilities in other countries to cyber attacks and covert operations against Iran's nuclear program.
And we discussed the possible future scenarios, the role of other world powers, and why the divisions among those powers make this problem harder to solve.
Finally, we reflected on the human side of this issue, the fear that drives both countries, the impact on ordinary people, and the importance of understanding different perspectives.
It has been a rich and meaningful conversation. I hope our listeners feel more informed and more confident in understanding this important global issue.
I really do too. And I want to thank everyone who has stayed with us through this entire episode. I know it was a longer conversation and the topic was serious, but you stuck with it, and that says a lot about your dedication to learning.
Yes, thank you so much. Your commitment to improving your English and understanding the world is truly admirable. We're proud to be part of your learning journey.
And remember, learning English is not just about grammar and vocabulary. It's about engaging with ideas, understanding different perspectives, and being able to communicate about the things that matter in the world.
That is what Easy English Talk podcast is all about, helping you grow your language skills while also growing as a thinker and a global citizen. We believe those two things go hand in hand.
Before we go, I want to remind you to leave a comment below. Tell us what you thought about today's episode. Was it helpful? Did you learn something new? Is there another global topic you would like us to cover?
We truly love reading your comments. They help us know what topics interest you and how we can make the podcast even better. So please do not be shy. Share your thoughts with us.
And one more thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to explore the other episodes on our channel. We have conversations about many different topics, from self-improvement and daily habits to communication skills and understanding the world around us.
Each episode is designed to help you improve your English while also giving you something valuable to think about. So take some time to browse through our episodes and find the ones that speak to you. There's something for everyone.
We put a lot of thought and care into every single episode, and we believe that each one can help you in some way. So go ahead and explore. We're confident you'll find more conversations that you enjoy and learn from.
Thank you again for being here today. It has been a wonderful conversation, and I feel grateful that we could share it with all of you.
I feel the same way. Thank you, Priya, for being such a thoughtful and insightful co-host as always. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care of yourselves, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode of Easy English Talk Podcast.
Goodbye, everyone. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep growing. We'll see you next time.